everybody. Welcome to another episode of Radiorama, where, as the name might possibly imply, I show you how to work on radios and other devices that run glowing vacuum tubes from the 1930s through about the 1960s. And today we have, as far as I can tell, a 1946 RDR, which stands for Radio Development and Research Corporation. It is the most generic, basic of 5-tube radios, and I've got a very bad sneaking suspicion that this has got to be a hot chassis set. At first I was like, what in the hell is this? I've never seen this brand. I've never seen this kind of radio. Well, I've seen this kind, but not this particular radio. And I looked it up, and RDR, their primary business was in making things like spy radios for the government. And in 1946, a lot of those contracts had dried up, obviously, because the war was over. At least I'm guessing that's why the business dried up. And they started making these really cheap radios. They later made the infamous whiskey bottle radio. I think it was the Ballantine radio. They were dissolved by 1965, but they had a pretty good run. I think information I saw about them said they started in around 1938. And they were pretty successful, and then they went out of business in 1965. By the look of this thing, I can't help but think it's got to be a hot chassis set, which would make sense for a very cheap radio. I can't help but think it's also been worked on, because that does not look like the original cord or speaker. So I'm going to bring it up on my Variac. Let me plug this in here and see what it's drawing. Come on, meter, turn on. It's drawing about 19 watts. Tubes are all lit.
That's a way to keep in touch. We're gonna take them.
Okay, I'm turning that off. That just was not good. That's a short. And I wouldn't be surprised if the rectifier tube is shorted, but I'm not going to do anything more until we take this out of the chassis and see. Not out of the chassis. It is Sunday morning, and it's Easter. That's not an excuse, but I'm not quite awake yet. Well, here is the radio out of the case. That's definitely a replacement speaker. It says it's made in Taiwan, which definitely would have not been around during when this radio was new. I can't help but think that they're using just a bunch of spare parts or parts they got for cheap, because these IF cans are gigantic for this set. Not that physical size matters, but still, it's a goofy size for such a little radio. It looks like underneath that someone has done the bare basics. They replaced the electrolytics, and that was it. There's, unfortunately, some not great news. The not great news is this is exactly what I thought it was going to be. It is a hot chassis set. And you can tell because one end of the switch here goes directly to the metal chassis. That means if you were to touch this metal and ground at the same time, you'd be getting everything that could possibly come out of the outlet right through your body. And some people, you can go in and lift and float everything, but that'd be a lot of effort. And there's another possibility here where we can make this safer, and that possibility is by making sure that this has a solid back that isn't easy to remove. It already has knobs that are held in with set screws that are recessed. I could also either use plastic screws to secure the bottom or put felt feet over the top of the screw holes. That way you can't get to the knob shafts, you can't get to the back, and you can't get to the underside. Because the problem when you start floating things, especially with capacitors, the performance of the radio will most likely suffer. And with some exceptions it won't, but that's with a simple, very basic radio like this, that is more likely going to be the case. So I'd rather not do that. I'd rather instead make this physically isolated. Be similar to what a lot of 1950s Zeniths do. So the good news is we know it works. The bad news is it's floating. I mean, it's a hot chassis. And the other bad news is that we probably have a shorted rectifier tube. But let's see here. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. We have 5, 6 paper capacitors to replace, and that's it. That didn't take too long. That took about 10 minutes to replace those capacitors. So it's on, and what I'm going to do is, before assuming that the rectifier tube's shorted, it could be that a capacitor was shorted. So let's see what it does. I'm going to keep an eye on that pilot light. And if I see it start to misbehave. By the way, if you're going to work on a hot chassis like this, definitely use an isolation transformer. Seems like it's taking a while to warm up. Like longer than normal. And I'm getting no sound either. There's sound.
They like 2015.
Okay, that's starting to get brighter. I'm pretty sure the rectifier tube's got a short in it. I don't know. Let me fire that up again and see if it actually does it. I don't need to see anymore. That's what the problem is. It's probably a bad rectifier. So let me replace that. Well, I need to remember to start throwing away my bad tubes because I had three 5Z5 tubes that were shorted. That obviously I'd put right back into my tube stash. So it's not blowing up the pilot lights anymore. And it's working pretty well actually.
Piece of art. Like flowers.
Got a little dirt in the tuning condenser, but that's okay. Just to make sure this is okay, I'm going to let that radio sit and cool for a while. At least let the tube filaments completely cool and fire it back up again. And if it doesn't blow up the tube filament, that means we're good. Meanwhile, I decided to make a double episode out of this since there's not much to that radio. And there might not be much to do on this one. This is a Howard, yes, a Howard brand radio that came into us. And it looks like someone's been in here and overhauled it. It's been a hot minute since it was restored because we've got these Japanese-made oil capacitors, which might very well just be fine. I don't know if the radio works or not. And what's curious about this thing is that someone went through all the effort of stripping down, sanding, and staining the cabinet, but they didn't finish it or put it back together again. So we got this like half-completed radio, and I decided, oh, it looks pretty cool. Plus, I don't know, my granddad's name was Howard. So I'm going to finish it up along with the Spy Company radio. Now today is refinishing in the household. Refinish the top of my mother-in-law's table and refinish this radio. I think I'll start with the radio and then move on to the table, but you don't need to see the table because this is not a antique table channel. It's an antique radio channel. I'm using this Varathane oil-based satin finish because me and brush-on paint don't get along. Here is the cabinet. It's been drying all day, or curing all day in the sun. And it's on there pretty thick, which is kind of what you want for a radio, especially if you're going to have people's hands all over it. But I think it looks pretty good. Came out pretty even. I'll probably buff it out a little bit, but now it's time to return to the chassis. I can confirm that it actually works fine. I'm probably going to replace some of those oil caps that are underneath there. But the radio is also just really, really grubby. And so I'm probably going to replace those caps, then clean this up a little bit. And then I want to do something about this bake light. This bake light looks pretty rough, but I think I can buff it out. And then this already has an audio input in the front with a switch. What I'm going to do is there was a knockout here, probably for an additional speaker connection. And I'm just going to go ahead and knock that out and put a rubber grommet in there so that we can run a separate audio cord They'll still retain this so that if someone actually wants to plug up a record player, they can, so they'll get both opportunities. This says phono motor. I have a theory that this might have gone into a small console as well. Don't know much about Howard Corporation, but I'm not even sure where they're from. I think maybe Chicago. I don't remember. You know, I thought that I was going to have to do the minimal amount of work on this, but actually the more I look at this, the more I realize that no, that's not the case. Because when I looked, I was like, well, wait a minute. You've got two of these electrolytics in what I thought initially was the original electrolytic can mounted up top, still connected. These capacitors here, Herald TV capacitors. Those are not oil capacitors. This could be paper capacitors, and they're old. So I think this was restored a long time ago. Maybe it was restored a long time ago, or maybe decades ago, but using old parts, but whatever. The bottom line is, even though it works and has been restored, the only things in here that I kind of trust is probably this and these orange and yellow drops. So at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the capacitors, they're fine, but these white ones, 1, 2, 3, 4, those need to be replaced, as well as these two electrolytics. And up top it said there were two. There's a 30 microfarad and a 20 microfarad capacitor. And in this case, with the transformer, the chassis is ground, so you can be creative about where you put your negatives if you want. Like, for example, this electrolytic has only one connection. And where does that go? That goes to, coming off that tube, whatever that tube is. I don't know if that's the rectifier. Yeah, that's the rectifier. That makes sense. So what you could do instead is you could just solder your positive connection of the positive terminal of the new electrolytic and run your negative somewhere else. But we'll see. Nevertheless, all that crap needs to be replaced. All right, all of those capacitors are replaced. And what I try to do with these electrolytics is I try to mount their negatives as close as I can to a chassis, so that there's nothing for them to wiggle around into. So they're kind of stuck down there real good. Let's see if it still works. If it doesn't work, that would be really embarrassing. Let's see. It would help if I turn my Variac on. All right. There we go. It's drawing about 35, 30. It's going to creep down a little bit as the tubes warm up. Okay, it's not drawing.
On Senior Anthony Figueredo. He says, I want you to...
Gee, it's loud. All right.
With the people. My name.
That's only half the antenna.
The conclave together. 20 days. National Catholic Report.
That's without an antenna, so I need to. Let me get a loop antenna over here and connect it and see what happens.
You should always consult.
Free. Together we can end hunger. Join the move.
Team, you know that's been to the playoffs.
Could just need an alignment. Also, everything's dirty in here, all the contacts. So let me get a contact cleaner and see if that makes any difference. Oops. All right, we'll get everything. And let's see, there's a switch there. All right. Walk that back and forth a few times. Work this back and forth a few times. Alright, let's see if that does anything.
Number five. All right, Donovan Jackson.
Yep. In predestining.
Okay, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਜਿੰਨੀਆਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹਜੇ ਤੱਕ ਵਾਈਡ ਹਾਊਸ ਆਲਰੇਡੀ
You know what I'm going to do? I think I'm going to place it upside, I'm going to place it right side up and clean all the tube sockets, and then probably clean out the tuning condenser because it's probably got dust bunnies and crap built up in it. Alright, I was able to knock out that little knockout there. Put a little rubber grommet in there like I said I would. Then I ran it to this switch. Now I can run audio in. I feel that that's very sacrilegious, but you know what? Whatever. I'm getting old. I know some of you genuinely old guys are like, hoo hoo hoo, that ain't nothing. Well, it's, I don't know. Feels weird to say like, yeah, that wasn't that long ago, and then like turn around and realize, yeah, it kind of was. That was like 30 something years ago. So, anyway, seems like it's running pretty good. I did kind of go through and clean these contacts up a little bit more. So now it's time to flip her over. But I need to move this knot down actually, and then put a little glue here so that doesn't yank out. And I think I'm gonna like do a little detailing on the top too, because it was grungy and filthy. You know, after I just got rid of some of the dust, it's not that bad. There's definitely some surface oxidation. It's never going to be perfectly clean, but that's okay. I just wanted to get all the loose stuff off and clean it up a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is lubricate the bearings for the tuning condenser. You'll see these little ball bearings here. And I just get in there with this oil dropper thing. I have it filled with Zoom spout oil. It's a very fine machine oil. I use it on everything from record changers to, I don't know, I use it around the house a lot. I used to use 3-in-1, but that stuff, it's alright, but it gums up every once in a while. And what you want to do is just kind of like touch, kind of like anything that has movement to it. And all these pulleys, I just use like just a touch, you know, because if you get it too much on there, it's just going to get all over the cord. Then you're going to be sorry about that. The idea is like make this easier and easier to tune so it just feels nicer. And I get a feeling there's actually some more stuff going on here. Yep, there's another pivot point. There's probably a bearing in there. Just make sure these both have a decent amount of movement. I feel like it's getting caught on other stuff. Where else could it be getting caught on? Well, probably getting caught here. Yeah, this needs to be cleaned up. So let me get out some WD-40. I have removed the glass. It's actually on plastic. Whoops, here we go. Howard. And I cleaned underneath it, and what I was able to do is also get to the rest of the tuning mechanism more easily, like this pulley. And what I did is I cleaned this up. This is kind of like this slide that this rides on. And so now this rides back and forth really nicely. Anyway, after cleaning this up and kind of just investigating it a little bit more, it's actually pretty nicely made. Like everything about it's really nice. It's got a good beefy power transformer. I love it. You know, it's a simple idea. Let's put a car speaker in there, then you get a massive amount of sound out of a small package. It's just the hardware is really well constructed. It's chunky. Its engineering seems to be pretty good, and it's decent. So it comes from a time back when we used to have hundreds, if not thousands, of little companies that made thousands and thousands of little things, and now we make lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of software. And boo-hoo. Anyway, I am going to use some Novus No. 2 plastic polish on the outside of this. I'm going to stay away from the, why do I keep on holding it in reverse? I don't want to get anything on the back because there's a good possibility that ink could come off. I just cleaned it with a kind of a damp cloth, but there are some scratches in here. And I also want to buff this out. And I think what I'm going to do is use my mechanical buffer and some Carnauba wax to get that shine back on that bake light. All right, the last thing I'm going to do is put a new grill cloth in the front. I thought I could salvage the one that was on it, but it was just like pretty ratty looking. I could not find out what the model number is on this because the model number is completely worn off. I just saw like model 9 something, and I looked that up and I got a few models that looked similar, and they all had this kind of like light-ish blonde looking grill fabric. And I think the front of the cabinet to me looks a little plain, just in my opinion. So I thought adding a little bit of a pattern fabric in the front might jazz it up a little bit. So I've got my ancient iron warming up here. Just feel the electric bill. Oops, you know what? I just forgot something. This is plastic, so I'm going to have to put down a cloth over the top of it. Big mistake on my part.
Flowers are nodding away the hours, sending the summer showers home. This is baby's birthday party day. Everyone's invited, the neighborhood's so excited, they're coming with such delight and smile. This is baby's birthday party day. Across the garden, lanterns gay are swinging.
This guy sounds really good. I can see where this would be a nice value. If you didn't have the money to spend on a great big console radio, but you wanted to have that big console sound, or almost that big console sound, this is your magic trick here. You've got this radio with a giant 6x9 speaker in it.
Here's a toast to the host, and a cheer that we're here, 'cause everybody's feeling fine.
On top of that, it's really sensitive on radio, which is pretty good.
You're told. Why?
Is reporting the board released new data in late February showing some positive trends in customer service.
With the series, I just don't know. This could be.
Now, one thing I didn't show that I had to do, I didn't have to do, but what I decided to do, I wanted this to light up pretty brilliantly. So what I did is I put in LED lights. You see what a difference that is? Let me put this over here so you can kind of get a better idea. See how dramatic that is? Well, what was happening when I took it inside, the light was actually shining straight up into the grill. So in a dark room, this grill was getting partially illuminated, which, I don't know, might bother some people. So what I did is I wrapped, let me show you what these lights look like, if I have any more of them. They look like this, and they're pretty bright. So what I did is I wrapped the sides with aluminum foil, well, actually aluminum tape, so that way they only point directly at the edges of the glass here. Now maybe a little bit will get back up into the cabinet somewhere, but if someone's going to get that upset about it, then whatever. Anyhow, I spent a little extra time on this because, again, it's a stupid reason, but it's named after my granddad, Howard. I looked up, and it was actually named after the guy that started it. I don't remember his first name, but his last name was Howard. And most of the stuff they made was actually things like communication receivers and transmitters, and they made a lot of stuff for the U.S. military during World War II, and they also sent a lot of stuff, believe it or not, to Switzerland. So no longer exists like most of these companies, but it's a pretty well-made product. The fact that they made ham radios means it's not surprising that this radio is also kind of chunky. But that concludes this episode of Radiorama, and even though it was kind of weird and short and unexpected, maybe you learned something out of it. But until the next time a radio comes across my workbench, I'll see you guys later. Bye-bye.